Well, let's follow up on the latest developments in this story today with three members of Parliament. From the foyer of the House of Commons this evening, we're joined by Conservative MP Erin O'Toole. Ginny Sims is the Employment and Social Development critic for the official opposition NDP. And Roger Cuzner is the Labour critic for the Liberal Party. Good to see you all.
Great to be here.
Mr. O'Toole, let me start with you. What is the purpose of the moratorium for the temporary foreign workers for the fast food industry? And can you give us some sense of how long it might last?
Well, look, I think the minister was clear when he established the moratorium there were some abuses reported to how the program was being administered. Those have to be investigated, but there were a few in quick succession. So the minister thought it best to put a moratorium, which sort of froze things until the powers to investigate can kick in and the government can look at it. We know full well that there's a lot of employers out there using the program appropriately. But the moratorium's only for the food services, so it's meant to address what came to rise in the last few weeks, which were some reports of the program not being used properly. Right. We certainly understand that the program is used in a lot of sectors, so it's only a moratorium going forward, Peter. Establishments that have temporary foreign workers in place now, not in fact impacted. It's about new ones are being frozen.
Ginny Sims, what else should the government be doing to deal with the problems in this program?
Well, we're pleased to see the moratorium, but at the same time, a moratorium on its own is not enough. There has to be an independent audit of the program, whether it's been the Royal Bank issue, and Royal Bank wasn't the only bank involved, or whether we've been taking a look at HD mining, whether we're looking at welders in the oil sands, or other workers up in the north, and in the suburban areas as well. It is very clear that right across the board, there are certain levels of abuse. And there are Canadians who are having their hours cut. There are Canadians who are being fired. And there are Canadians who are not being hired. So an independent audit, and out of that independent audit then, if we're going to have a program, it needs to be very strongly regulated.
Okay, let me come back to that, because I know that's you got a motion the House will be debating tomorrow on this, and
yes.
I want to get a little more into detail on that in just a moment. But let's bring in your colleague, Mr. Cuzner here. Roger Cuzner, what more should the government be doing to deal with the problems in this program?
Well, Peter, this is just another knee-jerk reaction to this program. We knew the problems had started back some time ago. This program has served Canadians, both business operators, many in the certain sectors. When you look at agriculture, we wouldn't have an agricultural industry in some areas if it wasn't for the temporary foreign worker program. But the problem started back in 2012 when Diane Finley was minister, and she put in the accelerated labor market opinions. She accelerated those and gave the opportunity for employers to pay 15% less for temporary foreign workers, and we saw the mess that created. Think back a year ago when we put forward a motion to have the House, have the Standing Committee study the program, find out what is serving Canadians well right now, find out where the problems are, have a consultation, and then come forward with some recommendations. But we've seen time and again, Peter, the bigger aspect is, this government continues to be often in error, seldom in doubt. They can do it all themselves, and this is yet another example of just, they're stumbling around with this file, and it's hurting Canadians.
Let Mr. O'Toole weigh in on that. But in this context, Mr. O'Toole, I mean, we've seen these complaints primarily here in the food service industry. How concerned is your government that the problems in the program run much deeper than just that one sector?
Listen, we're hearing the opposition here trying to have it both ways on this program to say, certainly there is a need for these workers, and Roger mentioned the roots in the agricultural sector. There's been generations picking apples in my area, so it comes from that seasonal background, but it now applies to a lot of areas of the economy where there would be a shortage, and that would actually impact the employment of other Canadians if their employer couldn't be fully productive. So last year, as you know, Peter, the minister made some key changes to this, and you see the impact those changes are having. In fact, the blacklisting of companies who abuse the program came out of changes that were made by the minister last year. That's now being used. The ability to perform inspections, on-site inspections and investigations were enhanced last year as part of the changes. Those are now being used. So
are you satisfied these abuses and problems are limited to, at this point, to the food service industry, and that it's not a problem across the program?
This is an area that we're going to have to continue to monitor, but there's no suggestion that there's widespread abuse throughout all sectors. There's 2% of employees in Canada, might be temporary foreign workers, going from the seasonal side, the sort of low-skilled type of jobs, right through to university professors coming from the United States or the UK. They're also under this broad program. So we need to give the powers to investigators of the department when we think there's abuse. That was a power given last year. And the moratorium will allow a time for a true deep dive on the food service sector to see if these reports are more of a trend.
Ginny Sims, you touched on it. The House will debate an NDP motion on Tuesday calling on the government to put a moratorium on the use of the program for low-skilled jobs in general and request the Auditor General to lead this independent review of the program. Why do you want the Auditor General involved?
Because the minister keeps saying that he's doing an ongoing review, and ever since I've been a member of Parliament over the last almost 3 years, what's happened is that we keep getting this sort of ongoing review, but we haven't really seen the program getting fixed. Every time the media breaks a new story or the opposition brings out a new story, we get this, I call it tinkering with the program. Look, HD Mining from BC is a prime example. They were going to be hiring miners from China, and they advertised they needed to speak Mandarin. When they got caught, they said, we won't do it. And then they also made a commitment to start training more miners right here in Canada. Now, let me tell you that there are miners available to work in BC right now. I've talked with some of them. But on top of that, this year, that same company is bringing in 30 more. So I don't blame the employers as much as I blame the government that keeps giving out LMOs, which is the permission employers need in order to bring in workers and displace Canadian workers. Mr.
Cuzner, you've also tabled a motion demanding the House Committee on Human Resources hold hearings on this program. And I guess at the heart of it is, as we hear these stories, I mean, Canadians ask themselves, look, do we need temporary foreign workers in this country or not? Is there a shortage of workers to fill these jobs or not? And it seems every time, I mean, there's sort of competing evidence on how serious a skill shortage might be and in which parts of the country it might be in. But the bottom line is, do we need, I mean, the program's got problems, but do we need this program, yes or no?
Yes. I think temporary foreign workers have served a number of sectors and a number of industries very well over the years. The problem has been just the knee-jerk approach. Whenever something hits the papers, like rather than going into a round of consultation, finding out what the real problems are, this government has responded by making ad hoc decisions. And
well, what's the ad hoc decision here? So the government's introduced a moratorium.
Shut down the moratorium. I like the idea
what would the better decision have been then?
Well, the better decision would have been last year to support the motion and do a study and to get it right, rather than stuffing it down our throats. This is what's going to happen. But I was happy to hear Jenny putting the motion, the opposition day motion tomorrow. I can just dust off my notes from last year and use them, because the problem has been the same. The problem is a lack of consultation on the part of this government in order to try to fix the problem to a program that I think is essential in some sectors, that's being abused in others. And but let's fix it. Let's get it right.
Okay, Mr. O'Toole, what about that?
Well, Peter, I think even in that last exchange you had where you asked what would you recommend, well, the minister saw some reported cases of abuse all in one sector, and he did the prudent thing, which was a temporary moratorium. Let's look deeper into this one sector, which represents one part of the overall program. And so it's crucial not to do some knee-jerk things that they're actually suggesting, which would be to cancel or eliminate it for the sector entirely. What we're saying is Canadians are served by this program when it's used properly. It actually allows employers to be productive, but there's zero tolerance for abuse.
All right, well, Ginny Sims, but Ginny Sims, in this context, Jason Kenney said today in the House he gets more requests from NDP MPs on behalf of business in their ridings to approve temporary foreign workers than any other party in the House.
Let me say,
have you asked the minister to expedite applications for
question.
temporary foreign workers for your constituents?
I have never asked the minister to
or the
expedite an
department.
LMO, which is the permission they need in order to hire.
But a specific
But
worker.
I will tell you, no NDP member of parliament has ever asked for a Canadian worker to be fired or not to be hired.
That's not the
But let me get back to what
Well, no,
I just
so,
heard
okay,
my
so,
colleague say.
No, but on that point, so there clearly parties across the House see some value in the program if they're acting on behalf of constituents to try.
But we've always been very clear that we're not saying that the whole program needs to be thrown out. But we're saying the program as it exists today is open to abuse. And that abuse started back in 2002 when the parameters were widened by my Liberal colleagues. Okay. And then in 2006, the government opened up the floodgates without putting regulations and enforcement in place. And it's the government that has to take the responsibility. They keep wanting to blame the employers. Yes, I blame the employers too. But who gives them permission in the first place? It's the government, and they have to do their due diligence to make sure that the employer has done everything to make sure Canadians have a first go at the jobs.
Right, but if the government gives them permission, I mean, some of the stories we've heard about abuse in the system, Mr. Cuzner, are people using the program to bring in workers and then abusing the application of the program for those workers in terms of housing or in terms of wages, in terms of not paying overtime or so on.
The excuses are, and the problems are fairly broad. And I know that Aaron had said it's one particular sector. That's not the fact. We've seen this in the mining sector. We've seen this in the banking industry. We've seen this in the service sector. Yeah. So the problems are broad and they're deep and they're complex. But by one-offing and by providing these, trying to tweak a system, let's make it right for Canadians, for Canadian businesses, and supporting those Canadian jobs that are essential.
All right. I guess I'll give a quick final word to you, Mr. O'Toole, here as we say goodbye. And what needs to be done here to get the thing fixed if it's across more than just the food service industry?
Specifically, Canadians need to remember two things here. The moratorium is temporary for this sector only to make sure that there's not widespread abuse. We don't think there is, but this will give time to do that. The second thing to remember, there's a zero tolerance for abuse. And in fact, the changes we made last year made that crystal clear, and there will be businesses that if they abuse it, they'll be blacklisted. So hopefully we'll see a little less politics tomorrow in the debate on this, because it is an important program and there has to be no abuse.
But there seem to be if the program is open to this much abuse, then perhaps there's something fundamentally wrong with the way either the program is being administered or monitored.
Well, no one suggests that there's widespread, Peter. That's why this sector, there'll be a deeper dive right now.
It is widespread because we're hearing from many sectors. It is not just the food industry. And I think very, very clearly, if we're going to have a temporary foreign workers program, we need to make sure it's highly regulated and the government has enforcement mechanisms. The only time we've seen any kind of a penalty, 3 people's names being published on a blacklist, is when CBC was about to break on a big story. So they broke the story, and within hours in the afternoon, on a Sunday afternoon, we get 3 companies added to a blacklist. What's happened to all these other companies?
With that, we're out of time, and I will say to our folks watching, though, this will take up much of the time in the House of Commons tomorrow in debate, and if they want to follow this story, they can follow the debate right here on CPAC. Thank you all for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Peter.